Hey, this is Tony with Side by Side Garage, and today we're going to cover the 25-hour service break-in on this 2020 Polaris Ranger 1000. In the 25-hour service, we're going to go over the braking system, the coolant system, and the electrical system. We're also going to inspect and replace the air filter if needed, and we're going to replace the oil filter and the engine oils, the transmission fluids, and the front differential fluid here. The other thing we highly recommend is keeping a little notebook that tracks all of the maintenance you do to the machine. You can also add any parts that you've added in the future of the machine. You can add that in here. And this helps you keep on track with your maintenance routine and also helps you with any future warranty claims. So in order to inspect the coolant system, we first have to remove the hood. So on the latches here, you give it a quarter turn. We grab the back and the front and we lift it off. Now that we have the hood off, there's two things we're going to check under the hood. We want to check and make sure the radiator cap is tight and secure. And then we're going to check the coolant level in the overflow tank here. You can see on this particular machine it's a little low on coolant. So right here you have two lines. You have maximum and minimum. And ideally we want the coolant to be right here in that range. And this is a cold reading, so this is when the machine has not been run recently. So we're going to add a little Polaris antifreeze coolant to this. This is a 50-50 premixed coolant. Okay, you can see we topped off the coolant. We brought it up to the max cold line here. We put the cap back on, and now we can replace the hood. So we set that on there, snaps in. We do the quarter turn on each fastener. Okay, we've got the Ranger jacked up and secured. Next thing we're going to go over here is the braking system. So in order to check the brakes, we need to pull the tire and wheel off. So we're going to use our impact wrench here with a 3/4 inch size socket for the factory lug nuts. Okay, the next thing we're going to check on the brake system here is our fluid level. So you can see right here there's a max and a minimum line. And as the brake pads wear, you will start to see the line of fluid go down towards the minimum. So you will, over the life of the machine, have to add a little bit of fluid to this. So you can pull the cap right here by spinning it off. And right here on the cap specifies the type of fluid you want to use, DOT 4. Moving on down from the slave cylinder here, we want to make sure all our lines are secure and tight. And as we feel down them, we want to make sure that we're feeling for any residue on them, indicating possibly a leak. We follow the lines down, we make sure there's no kinks or pinches or any areas that are maybe loose or have come in contact with any of the suspension components causing any damage or fray to the line. Everything appears to be nice and secure here. And move on to the caliper. We want to make sure the caliper is nice and securely mounted. There's no loose fasteners. And we can look at the brake pads here, and we're checking the pads for the amount of material that are actually on the pad. It's called your brake lining. And we're making sure we don't have any uneven wear between the two pads there. We're going to look at the rotor for any damage as well. At this point, I'm going to move on to the other corners of the vehicle and check all of them as I check this. Okay, we're going to put the tire and wheel back on, and we're going to hand start all of the lug nuts. We're going to get a few threads started here before we come in with the impact. So now that those are snugged up, I can put the weight of the vehicle down on the wheel and I can follow it with the torque wrench. On an aluminum wheel, we torque these to 120 foot-pounds. On a steel wheel, it's 60 foot-pounds. Okay, the weight of the vehicle is down on the tire and wheel assembly now. I have my torque wrench set to 120 foot-pounds, and we're going to torque these in a star pattern. So you can hear the click there. So the next thing we're going to service is our front differential here, and this is the drain plug. The size for the drain plug is an 8mm Allen. So we're going to pull the drain plug here and drain the fluid out. Okay, now that we've drained all the fluid out of the front differential, we replace the drain plug and we torque it to 10 to 14 foot-pounds, and we wipe all the residual fluid off the skid plate here. And we move on to filling the front differential up. Okay, now that we've removed the fill plug on the front differential, we can add the Polaris demand drive. The front differential takes 8.5 fluid ounces in this machine. In order to aid in the ease of installation of that fluid, we like to use a funnel with a hose connected. That goes right in and makes the job a little cleaner. Okay, now that we've put the fluid in the front differential, we can reinstall the fill plug, and we torque this plug at 10 to 14 foot-pounds. Okay, next we're going to drain the fluid on the transmission. Like the front, it's an 8mm Allen. Same thing as the front, we're going to take a close inspection on that magnet, and it's totally normal to have some fine particulate there on the magnet. We're just going to wipe that off. What we're looking for is much bigger chunks that have broken off, potentially like a tooth or some part of a ball bearing or something. So we just clean that magnet off, and you can see the magnet and the little O-ring there. And once that's all clean, we reinstall it once all the fluid has drained out and torque it to 10 to 14 foot-pounds. Okay, we're at the fill plug on the transmission here. We're going to break that loose and remove that. And in the Ranger transmission here, we're going to fill it with 44 ounces of the Polaris AGL fluid. This is specific for gear cases and transmissions on Polaris units. So we're going to use the same funnel with the hose here to get access on that and pour in from the top. Okay, we've put the AGL fluid inside the transmission here. We've reinstalled the fill plug, and we're just going to torque it to 10 to 14 foot-pounds. Okay, next here we're going to drain the engine oil plug. That's a 6mm Allen. This plug is not a magnetic plug. It does have a copper washer though. And we do want to make sure the copper washer is intact when we reinstall it. Again, torque this one to 12 foot-pounds. Okay, for the 2020 Polaris Ranger 1000 oil change, we have 2.5 quarts of oil, and we have the Polaris 2540086 oil filter. In regards to the oil being used today, we chose to use the factory suggested oil, which is the PS4 synthetic oil designed for 4-cycle engines. There's lots of different oils you can use, but we do suggest using an oil that meets the factory parameters in order to prevent any future warranty claims. When dealing with the oil filter and putting the new one on, we like to suggest marking them with the hours, the date, and the miles. This will help you keep track of your service records in the future. And then if you ever have any complications removing it off the engine, we use an engine oil filter wrench or a strap wrench to remove it. Okay, in order to access the oil filter and the fill plug, we had to tilt the bed here, and we bend this heat shield up just a little bit to gain some access for my forearm here, and then we twist the oil filter counterclockwise. And we place some rags down under there to help capture some of the oil that drains out of the filter. And one of the things we're going to be checking for when we lift the filter up is that it has the rubber O-ring on it that seals to the block, because we don't want to double stack the filter O-ring. So this filter does have the O-ring on it. Okay, before we install the oil filter, we're going to pre-fill the oil filter with oil first. And what we do is we pour oil in the center hole there and let it soak through the pleats into the can portion of the filter here. Next, we take a little bit of oil and we pre-lube right along the top surface of the sealing O-ring here. And that prevents us from tearing or damaging that seal as we install it against the machine surface of the engine. Okay, once the oil has soaked into the filtering media, we can reinstall the oil filter on the machine. And this does not need to be wrenched on here with a big wrench, just hand tight, just snug, just like that. Next, we can bend our heat shield back in place here and remove the fill cap and set a funnel in there and begin filling our oil. After you've poured your 2.5 quarts of oil in, Reinstall your fill port cap. Nice and secure there. Next, we're going to service the air intake system. This is the pre-filter right here, and we want to make sure the pre-filter is clean of any debris and doesn't have any damage to it. Next, the air flows down this hose and into the air canister or air box here. So one of the things we want to note here are the two manufactured arrows into the cap here that indicate the alignment with these two spring tabs. So on removal, we release the latches, there's one on either side here, and then we release the spring tension on the tabs and the cover comes off. We want to take a look at the moisture drain here, make sure it's not full of any debris and it's still pretty pliable and seals up tight. That way no debris is coming in there, and it'll allow the moisture, if any moisture gets in here, to drain out and fall out the bottom. Okay, we have the air filter lid off. We're going to grab a hold of the filter and give it a little quarter turn and pull out. And this machine has 23.5 hours and 100 miles on it. And the filter looks pretty good. I have a brand new one here to compare. And as you can see, there's a lot of life left in this filter. So we're going to go ahead and take this brand new one and set it on the shelf for next time. One of the things we like to do to ensure that we have a solid seal on the air filter, nothing can get past this, is to put just a little bit of grease on the inside sealing lip here. And once we have just a nice little light coat there, take the air filter, set it on, and just kind of give it a quarter turn as you get on there, and that'll spread that grease and really make a solid seal there. Next, we take the air filter lid, and remember these two arrows, we line those up with the little spring tabs. They snap into place right there. We take the latches and snap those down in place, and we're good to go. In order to access the battery, you lift up on the passenger seat here, rock it up and out, set that aside, and then there's a storage tray in here you can lift up and set that aside. Okay, now that the seat and the storage container has been removed, we have good access to the battery. We want to make sure the battery is tight and securely mounted to the frame. And then we want to check each terminal. So this is the negative terminal. It's tight and free of any corrosion. We can move over to the positive terminal. It's tight and free of any corrosion. For future reference, if you guys ever have problems with fuses or relays, this is your fuse panel. And you squeeze the two tabs on either side and lift up, and you can see on the cover listed inside is what they all are. Part of the 25-hour service is visually inspecting the fuel system. So you can see right here we have a good visual of the fuel tank and the sending unit and some of the wires and hoses coming out of the sending unit there. So what the manual calls for is to turn on the key and let the fuel pump turn on, and we're looking for any leaks throughout the system and any damage to any of the fuel lines. The other thing we want to make sure is there's multiple little plastic clips that hold the fuel lines in place, and we want to make sure those are engaged 100%. Okay, now that we're done with that, we can reinstall the storage container here. Pops down into place. We can take the passenger seat and note the little hooks here snap into these little holes here. So we just stand it vertically and line them up. Get the seat belts above and firmly press it in place. When you buy a new machine, it's good practice to walk around and check for missing fasteners or anything that may be loose. On this particular machine, the dealer missed this particular bolt, and this grab handle is not installed on the bottom. So what we're going to do is just remove this fastener, slide the grab handle in place, and tighten the fastener in place. Just a good practice to get into to make sure you have a safe, enjoyable ride. Okay, last thing we got to do is reset the service clock. So the first thing we do here is turn the key on. We press and hold mode. That'll get us into options. We toggle up until we hit the service hour, and then we press mode one time, and that starts it flashing, and we can change our hours by 5-hour increments. Our next service on this particular machine is at 50 hours, so we're going to leave it right here and Press mode. That's going to reset it. Toggle up to hit exit, hit mode, and toggle over. Service has been reset at 25 hours. So at 50 hours, this machine will need to be resurfaced. This concludes our 25-hour service on the 2020 Polaris Ranger 1000. Thanks for watching Side by Side Garage. Please go ahead and like, subscribe, and share, and we'll catch you next time.